Have you ever noticed how the freest men are the ones the women can't seduce anymore? They don't chase. They don't beg. They simply stand apart. And somehow that drives everyone mad. Because modern love isn't built on devotion anymore. It's built on dependency, on the quiet fear that you might walk away. They call it romance, but underneath, it's just a system of control wearing perfume. You've been told your entire life that happiness means being chosen, that love completes you, that solitude means something's wrong. But what if the truth is the opposite? What if every man who learns to be alone becomes ungovernable? What if the greatest rebellion left isn't in conquest, but in detachment? Because the man who no longer needs to be loved cannot be manipulated by it, and that, more than anything, is what terrifies them. Schopenhauer warned that desire is the root of suffering. Jung went further. He said wholeness begins where need ends. So the question isn't why women hate single men. It's why a society built on dependence fears the man who's finally free. You wake up tired, not physically, emotionally. Tired of performing, tired of auditioning for worthiness, tired of proving your value to people who will never be satisfied. Every interaction feels like a transaction. You give attention, you receive validation, you withdraw care, they withdraw approval. Back and forth, a soul-exhausting performance where nobody wins and everyone keeps score. You've become a puppet in someone else's emotional theater. And the strings? They're made of guilt, of obligation, of fear that if you stop performing, you'll be left behind, forgotten, labeled as broken. The world has convinced you that needing less makes you defective, that boundaries make you cold, that silence makes you cruel, that choosing yourself makes you selfish. Jung, the most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. You feel drained because you've been giving from an empty well. You feel manipulated because every gesture of care comes with an unspoken invoice. Every moment of intimacy carries hidden expectations. Every act of kindness demands reciprocation. This is what they don't tell you. Exhaustion isn't weakness. It's clarity breaking through. Carl Jung spoke of the shadow. Everything we refuse to acknowledge about ourselves, the parts we've disowned, the truths we've buried, the desires we've locked away because they don't fit the story society wants us to tell. Jung believed that failure to recognize these shadow elements is often the root of conflict between people, that when we don't face what we've hidden, we project it onto others. Jung wrote, "Everyone carries a shadow, and the less it is embodied in the individual's consciousness, the blacker and denser it is." Here's what that means for you. When you choose solitude, people don't see you. They see their own rejected independence. When you set boundaries, they don't hear no. They hear the echo of their own suppressed desire for freedom. When you walk away from manipulation, they don't witness strength. They witness a mirror reflecting their own cage, and they hate mirrors. Jung explained that the more the ego denies the shadow, the more the shadow dominates your life. Jung warned, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Most people have denied their need for independence so deeply that they've forgotten it exists. They've surrendered their sovereignty for the illusion of security. They've traded their selfhood for temporary comfort. They've bartered their peace for the approval of people who don't really know them. And when you refuse to make that trade, you become dangerous. Not because you're aggressive, not because you're cruel, but because you're ungovernable. You've discovered what they're terrified to admit. You don't need their approval to exist. You don't need their validation to have value. You don't need their presence to be whole. Schopenhauer saw this clearly. We forfeit 3/4 of ourselves in order to be like other people. This terrifies them, because if one person can be completely alone, then maybe the entire system they built their identity on is a beautiful fraud. Maybe the relationships they're clinging to are prisons they've decorated to look like homes. Maybe their devotion is just dependency wearing a prettier name. You've integrated what they've projected outward. You've faced the shadow they refuse to see, and in doing so, you've become the screen upon which they project their deepest fear, that they might be fundamentally alone even while surrounded by others. Jung understood this projection. Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. The rage you receive isn't about you, it's the rage of the imprisoned toward the man who found the exit. Arthur Schopenhauer saw what most refuse to acknowledge. He wrote that romantic love is nature's most elaborate deception. What we call love, the passion, the obsession, the conviction that this person is the one, is biology's trick to ensure reproduction. Nature doesn't care about your happiness. It cares about continuation, about genetic survival, about using your emotions as puppets to serve its agenda. Schopenhauer stated, "The only true purpose of every communion in love is procreation." Although people who are in love are unable to conceive nature's treacherous way. Do you feel that intensity, that certainty, that magnetic pull? It's not destiny, it's chemistry. It's your biology hijacking your consciousness, casting a shining veil over the actual mechanics of the game. Schopenhauer concluded that marriages of love are often unhappy precisely because their aim is the perpetuation of the species, not the pleasure of the individual. Nature doesn't care if you're happy forever. It doesn't care if you're happy for a year. It barely cares if you're happy for a day, so long as reproduction is achieved. And then, you're left holding the bill for a transaction you never consciously agreed to. You wake up years later and realize you've been serving an agenda that was never yours, playing a role in a script you never wrote, following instructions from a biological program that has no interest in your well-being beyond your usefulness to its goals. But you've seen through the veil. Schopenhauer revealed the truth. Marrying means to have one's rights and double one's duties. You've recognized the fever of attraction for what it is. Temporary insanity designed to bind you to biology's merciless imperative. You've understood that the compulsion to possess isn't connection, that the obsession to merge isn't intimacy, that the desperation to complete yourself through another isn't love, it's programming. And you've committed apostasy against nature's oldest religion. You've refused to sacrifice yourself on the altar of genetic continuity. This transforms you from servant into philosopher, from puppet into person, from actor into author. You're no longer buying what they're selling, not because you're incapable of love, not because you're broken, not because you're damaged, but because you become conscious of the game. And once you see the trap, you can never be lured back into it with the same effectiveness. This is why they call you bitter. Why do they diagnose you with problems? Why do they insist something must be wrong with you? Because the alternative is too threatening to consider, that you might be right, that the entire edifice of romantic ideology, the movies, the songs, the stories, the social scripts, might be built on sand, that we've been selling each other a beautiful fraud, passing it down through generations like a cherished heirloom that was always worthless. You don't argue against the dream. You simply refuse to dream it, and in your refusal, the dream begins to collapse for those who witness it. You disappear, but not because you're weak. You disappear because you've chosen peace over performance. Let them call it avoidance. Let them diagnose it as fear. Let them label it however they need to maintain their narrative. You know the truth. Withdrawal is not retreat when you're walking toward yourself. Silence is not emptiness when you finally stop filling it with noise to avoid your own thoughts. Boundaries are not walls when they're protecting something sacred, your sovereignty. Jung described individuation as becoming a single, unified self, what he called self-realization. This doesn't happen in crowds. It doesn't happen while you're performing for an audience. It doesn't happen while you're splitting yourself in half to fit someone else's idea of who you should be. It happens in the solitude you've been taught to fear. Schopenhauer understood this. A man can be himself only so long as he is alone. And if he does not love solitude, he will not love freedom, for it is only when he is alone that he is really free. That space you've been running from, it's not a void, it's a crucible. It's where the fragmented parts of you get forged into something whole, where the masks fall away, where the actor becomes the author of his own existence. You've been conditioned to believe that needing nothing makes you broken. But here's what they won't tell you. The man who needs nothing possesses everything. Power has never belonged to those who desire most intensely. It belongs to those who can walk away without looking back. Your refusal is your reclamation. Emerson wrote, "These are the voices which we hear in solitude, but they grow faint and inaudible as we enter into the world." Society everywhere is in conspiracy against the manhood of every one of its members. You're not rejecting connection. You're refusing to trade your selfhood for the illusion of it. You're not avoiding intimacy. You're declining to participate in the exhausting marketplace where affection is currency and attention is commerce. You've seen through the machinery. You recognize care as control, devotion as desperation, love as leverage, and you've made the radical choice to opt out. This is strength in its purest form, not the loud strength of conquest, but the quiet strength of sufficiency. You don't need to prove anything. You don't need to explain yourself. You don't need permission to exist on your own terms. Emerson wrote, "Nothing can bring you peace but yourself." You've discovered this truth not through philosophy, but through experience. Jung said it perfectly. The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. Through nights spent alone that felt more honest than years spent performing. Through silence that revealed more than 1,000 conversations ever could. Through solitude that offered more clarity than any relationship promised. Your withdrawal is not punishment, it's protection, self-preservation, sacred refusal. You're not running away from others, you're walking toward yourself. And that journey, it must be taken alone. Listen carefully, the system profits from your insecurity. Every advertisement, every movie, every song, every social script you've internalized, they all deliver the same message. You're incomplete. You need someone else to make you whole. You need external validation to have value. You need constant connection to prove you matter. This is the lie that keeps the machinery running. Because once you believe you're insufficient alone, you become controllable. You perform for approval. You chase validation. You sacrifice your peace for temporary reassurance that you're worthy. But you've started to see through it. You've begun to recognize the transaction hiding behind every "I love you." The control masquerading as care, the manipulation disguised as devotion. And slowly, quietly, you've made a revolutionary discovery. You were always enough. Not because you've achieved something, not because you've earned it, not because someone finally validated you, but because wholeness was never something to be achieved. It was something to be remembered. Jung spoke of the self, the deepest layer of the psyche, the archetype of wholeness. It was always there. You just forgot it existed while you were busy trying to complete yourself through others. Jung explained, loneliness does not come from having no people about one, but from being unable to communicate the things that seem important to oneself. Every relationship that drained you was teaching you something. You can't become whole while remaining halved by dependence. Every manipulation you endured was showing you something. You can't know yourself while performing for an audience. Every boundary you set was revealing something. Your peace matters more than their comfort with your compliance. You're not broken for choosing yourself. You're awake. You've done the math that society forbids. One can equal one. Whole and complete, requiring no addition to achieve wholeness. This is the knowledge that makes you dangerous. Not your anger, not your bitterness, not your isolation, your contentment, your peace in the space where they find only terror. Your comfort in your own company while they scramble to fill every silence. You've stopped believing in the dream they sold you, that happiness requires another person, that completion comes through union, that 1 + 1 = more than 2. And in stopping your belief, you've threatened the entire system. Because if you can be happy alone, what does that say about everyone who's miserable together? If you can find peace in solitude, what does that reveal about those who can't stand their own company? If you can choose sovereignty over security, what does that expose about those who've surrendered everything for temporary comfort? You've become a mirror, and people destroy what they cannot integrate. But here's what they'll never understand. You're not their enemy. You're their possibility, the living proof that the cage was always unlocked, that the chains were always imaginary, that the prison was always of their own making. You've achieved what Jung called individuation, not perfection, not superiority, not detachment, integration. You've brought the shadow into consciousness. You've faced the parts of yourself you were taught to hide. You've integrated what others still project outward. And in becoming whole, you've discovered something they can't conceive. Freedom is not found in addition, but in subtraction, not in acquiring more love, more validation, more connection, but in needing less, in needing nothing at all from a world built on need. Emerson declared, "What I must do is all that concerns me, not what the people think." You've internalized this completely. You no longer perform for an audience you didn't choose. You no longer audition for approval from people whose opinions you never solicited. You no longer seek validation from a system designed to profit from your insecurity. And in that refusal, you've discovered something extraordinary. When you stop needing their world, you stop being controlled by it. The threats lose their teeth. The promises lose their shine. The entire apparatus of social control, built on hope and fear, on the carrot of acceptance and the stick of rejection, ceases to function. You found the exit they claimed didn't exist, not through aggression, not through rebellion, not through loud proclamation, through quiet certainty, through the simple act of walking away from a negotiation where you were always going to lose. Emerson observed, "It is easy in the world to live after the world's opinion. It is easy in solitude to live after our own. But the great man is he who in the midst of the crowd keeps with perfect sweetness the independence of solitude." This is your achievement. Not retreat, but sovereignty. Not isolation, but integration. Not loneliness, but wholeness. You walk among the crowd, but you're no longer there. You participate when you choose. You withdraw when you need. You engage on your terms or not at all. And this simple act of self-possession is revolutionary, because most people have forgotten they ever had a self to possess. They've surrendered it so gradually, so completely, that they can't remember what it felt like to belong to themselves, to answer only to their own conscience, to seek only their own approval, to live by their own standards rather than performing for an audience that will never be satisfied. You've reclaimed what they've lost, and your reclamation is their accusation. Your peace is their indictment. Your wholeness is their reminder of their fragmentation. This is why they hate you, not for what you say, not for what you do, but for what your existence implies. That freedom was always possible, that the cage was never locked, that they chose this. So here's what you need to understand. This path is not for everyone. It requires something most people won't give. Honesty. Brutal, unflinching honesty about why you do what you do. Why do you seek approval? Why do you fear rejection? Why do you perform instead of simply existing? It requires facing your shadow, the parts of yourself you've hidden because they weren't acceptable, the needs you've buried because they made you seem weak, the truths you've avoided because they complicated the story. Jung called this individuation. The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. The painful process of becoming who you actually are instead of who you've been pretending to be. It's not comfortable. It's not quick. It's not something you can do while maintaining the approval of everyone around you. Because becoming whole means integrating what others have rejected. It means embracing what society calls unacceptable. It means standing alone while others demand you conform. But here's the question only you can answer. Would you rather be comfortable or free? Would you rather be accepted or authentic? Would you rather be loved for a performance or respected for your truth? Because you can't have both. The world doesn't reward sovereignty. It rewards compliance. It doesn't celebrate independence. It celebrates conformity. It doesn't honor authenticity. It honors the masks that make others comfortable. So you have to choose. Keep performing for an audience that will never be satisfied, or walk away into the uncertainty of becoming yourself. Keep trading pieces of your soul for temporary validation, or reclaim your wholeness even if it means walking alone. Keep pretending the chains are necessary, or accept that you've always been free, you just forgot. This is not a prescription. It's not a command to abandon all relationships or view connection as weakness. It's simply recognition of a truth that exists whether you acknowledge it or not. The capacity to be alone is the foundation of the capacity to love. Not the desperate fusion born of incompleteness, not the anxious attachment born of fear, but the sovereign choice to share your wholeness with another's wholeness. Each complete, each free, each choosing presence over need. Most people never get there, because getting there requires passing through the fire of solitude, through the discomfort of facing yourself without distraction, through the painful realization that you've been running from the one person you can never escape. You, but on the other side? On the other side is something they'll never understand. Not happiness in the way the world sells it, not the euphoric highs of romantic obsession, but something deeper. Peace. The kind of peace that doesn't depend on another person's approval. The kind of freedom that doesn't require permission. The kind of wholeness that can't be taken because it was never given by anyone else. They'll call you bitter. They'll call you broken. They'll call you cold, damaged, incapable, defective. They'll diagnose you with every affliction except the one you actually possess. Clarity. You see what they refuse to see. You know what they cannot admit. You've achieved what they dare not attempt. And so they hate you. Not for your solitude, but for your liberation. Not for your isolation, but for your integration. Not for your loneliness, but for your wholeness. You are living proof that everything they believe is negotiable, that the relationships they're clinging to might be optional, that the validation they're chasing might be unnecessary, that the approval they're performing for might be worthless. You've become the man who can't be owned, the man who needs nothing from them, the man who has discovered the secret they spend lifetimes hiding from. You were always enough. You were always complete. You were always free. The only question that matters, the only question that has ever mattered, are you brave enough to believe it? Not in theory, not as philosophy, not as something you read and nod along with, but as the truth you live, even when they call you broken for it, even when they reject you for it, even when standing in your truth means standing alone. Because here's what nobody tells you. Freedom isn't comfortable. Sovereignty isn't convenient. Wholeness isn't easy. But it's yours. It always has been. The cage was never locked. The chains were always imaginary. The prison was always of your own making. And the key? The key is the hardest thing in the world. Accepting that you are always free to walk away. From the manipulation, from the performance, from the exhausting transaction of modern relationships, from the belief that you need their approval to exist, from the lie that you're incomplete without another person, from the dream that sold you chains and called them connection. You were always free. The only question is what you'll do with that freedom. Will you use it to become who they want, or will you use it to discover who you are? The answer will determine everything. Choose wisely, choose honestly, choose yourself, because in the end, that's the only choice that was ever really yours.